Welcome, friends. You are watching Reflections, a program sponsored by Paducah Cooperative Ministry, where we do God's work with human hands. I'm Karen Winkel. I'm the pastor at United Church of Paducah, and my co-host, Gregory Waldrop, who's pastor at Fountain Avenue United Methodist, is gone today. And so I am the solo host, and I'm grateful to be here today with Monica and Paul Bilak, who are residents of Lower Town here in Paducah and who have brought their faith with them to Paducah. And that faith is expressed in lots of ways, but is expressed in a particular way that we're going to talk about today. Global Nomad has some faith-based elements that I think would be lovely to explore. And in Global Nomad itself, and out of Global Nomad, a faith-based effort. Monica is the keeper of the coffee house, and Paul oversees and directs and powers up a ministry for AIDS orphans in Kenya. Mm-hmm. So we'll be hearing about both of those things today and how your faith feeds and informs the work that you are doing and the lives that you're living. So first off, we got to know where Global Nomad is and how it is that you landed in Paducah to do this. So share it if you would.
The Global Nomad is at the corner of 6th and Harrison in Lower Town, about 3 blocks from the Executive Inn, 3 blocks from Paducah Bank, just back in Lower Town. We came to Paducah about 4 years ago. We had been living in Kenya, and when we came back to the States, I'm a nurse practitioner, and we were looking for a job for me, and we had moved to Nashville thinking it would be the nice, right-sized town for an opportunity. But as it turned out, the Nashville market was saturated with mid-level providers, and the only opportunities were going to be in smaller towns. And my college roommate lived in Paducah and had been asking us to come to Paducah for the last 15 years. And we finally thought, if we're going to a small town, let's go where we have friends. And we came to Paducah, my friend actually gave me the yellow pages and said, just start calling doctors and see who answers. So I got a job, we moved to Paducah, and about 6 months later, looked very seriously at the artist relocation program, found a house that we liked, convinced the relocation directors that there would be a place in the neighborhood for a coffee shop, and we bought the house and spent a lot of money fixing it up and have settled in the neighborhood now.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. How is it that your faith is part of what you are doing at Global Nomad? How would you, because my understanding is that you're members of First Presbyterian just down the street. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes people view faith and business as somehow separate, and I know that they're integrated for you.
Well, we had, in anticipation of this conversation, Monica and I have talked a lot about how does our business or our professional lives, how do they reflect our spiritual lives? And we really haven't come up with a good answer for that, other than I think because of where we are spiritually, everything that we do comes out of that spirituality or that place in a spiritual journey. Mm-hmm. So to that extent, when we moved to Paducah and I was working in a doctor's office, people found out that we had been missionaries in Africa for 3 years. And they'd say, well, have you ever considered any kind of ministry here in Paducah? And I thought, I have a ministry. I'm a healthcare provider, and I hope to minister to people who come in when they're sick. So I think what we do with our lives is an extension of where we are spiritually. So we opened a coffee shop because when we lived in Kenya, we had wonderful coffee. And our friends, our American friends who lived in Kenya would always joke about how we moved to the third world to become coffee snobs. But we had coffee that was fresh roasted that morning and served to us for breakfast. And so you just kind of get a taste for what fresh coffee really can be. And so we thought, we want this, and hopefully someone else in the neighborhood will also.
Well, too, we wanted the sense of community that is created when you sit down. In Kenya, really, we had tea a lot. Actually, in our house, you would have tea twice a day. And we have it at 10:30 and at 2:30. And actually, the entire village that we lived in stopped. Nobody worked at 10:30 and 2:30. Everybody took tea. And everybody sat down, and they got either in, someone's home, or even there were people working, as we lived on a big station. They would all, wherever their office was or whatever, everyone would have tea. And you took 30 minutes out, and you sat down with whoever you're with. You didn't work, and you just relaxed, and you had this time. And I kind of miss that too. I mean, it's not just about coffee, but it is in some ways, because we liked bringing Kenya here, and Kenyan coffee and coffee from all over the world. But there's also a sense of community that is created when people make themselves stop in the middle of the day. And we like that about Africans, that was something they always did. And so that also was a part of it and played into it as well. So, and then with that whole idea of coffee, when we first moved here and even lived in Nashville, I had seen a store called 10,000 Villages, and they had fair trade goods. And I had been already thinking, even when living in Kenya, there are so many amazing artisans and women who can weave the most exquisite baskets and, just their art forms, and trying to figure out a way to get those here. And then as I saw 10,000 Villages and this really good system and offering good prices to people in the third world, livable wages, and then selling them here, was really appealing to me. So then I got into the fair trade market as well, so that I could support third world artisans and people around the world. So that was kind of also a niche, and they just seem to go well together, because our coffee is fair trade and it's organic, and then the gifts also being fair trade was just a good fit. So that's how that went together.
People in this area aren't familiar with that phrase, fair trade.
Right.
My church sells to ourselves fair trade coffee and chocolate and cocoa, and it's surprising to me how often we need to just tell each other what that
people
means.
Get confused with free trade. They sound like they're similar. They have nothing to do with each other. But fair trade is when, say, a buyer like me or manufacturer will enlist people, either cottage industry or artisans, to produce goods for them. But rather than give them the lowest lowball price, they kind of have a standard that says, we want you to have a life, we want you to be able to educate your children, feed your family, have health care, and we're going to give you a just and livable wage. And we do that in America. It's just sometimes when people creep out of their boundaries into countries that don't have laws that protect the people within those countries, and so it's a really neat way to be a retailer or a manufacturer. It's giving people dignity all over the world, and
exactly.
It's a
And certainly
kind way
that's
to do
a
it.
very strong element, I think, of the Christian faith, is an honoring of the dignity of each person, and not viewing them somehow as an object or the means by which your own life is enriched or sustained.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's so easy. I got into the whole fair trade idea and movement because I had seen how it actually affects people on the other side of the globe. And it is hard here. You said people don't hear about it here so much because we're so isolated, and we can be, and lots of large companies don't really want you to think about those things. They want you to think about the bottom line price. And so it is a struggle. I mean, you kind of have to research it and find out about it and be what they call a conscientious consumer, you know, and thinking about how does my buying this product here really affect someone, you know, across the world. And so it's empowering as well, though, as a consumer.
Well, one of the things that I appreciate whenever I'm at Global Nomad is because you have these fair trade crafts, I feel the person, you know, even though I don't know who it is, I feel somehow the personhood in that item, in that creation, and you know, and the ingenuity. You brought a purse today that I have seen at Global Nomad. That's just this amazing creation out of the
Yes, it
tops
is.
of Coke cans and woven together in something lovely, and that that helps me stay connected to the ingenuity of people in a place where maybe resources are limited, or you know, where the means to acquire the materials to create you know, is limited because of economics, that people are seeing possibilities where where we might not, and that just opens a whole world, I think, for me every time I go to Global Nomad.
Thanks. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and you have a good eye, so you know, I can't ever go in and buy a cup of coffee. I'm, you know, I have to then go and
There's fun things
buy
to pick
presents
through.
for
I
myself
know.
on
Well,
the way
it's
out.
fun for me as well. You know, speaking of those purses that are made with Pop-Tarts, and you know, talking to the owner of the company, and he's all excited, and you know, he started this cottage industry with 45 women, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art has picked up on this whole idea. So he, you know, and it's the excitement of knowing these people and seeing them be successful in their efforts to help these women in Brazil. And it's a really neat experience for me as well, on all kinds of levels. So, yeah.
Well, I'd like to so that Paul. Oh, here it is.
The purse. You found
Yeah,
it. It's
here it is.
Yeah. And it is. It's just, I mean, they're wonderfully made, and they're made with pop
You would
tabs.
not know.
And they're crocheted. I mean, they're just hours and hours of work, and they've crocheted the whole thing together.
It's just
Isn't that great?
sleek and stylish.
Oh, it's just
and,
great.
You know,
Yeah.
if I were to see you walking around with that, I wouldn't know.
Oh, people
the
give me
story about
second.
it.
They go, "What's that?" And one lady even said, "Oh, your purse is back." I went to a store like 2 days in a row, and she didn't notice me, but she noticed my purse. She was. So it's things like that
Wonderful.
that are fun to,
Yeah.
fun to find.
Well, yeah, and you have a good eye, so
thanks.
there are plenty of temptations. I know if I go.
Yeah, there are.
I know if I go that I'll be writing a check. I
Uh-huh.
won't just be handing over, you know, a little bit for coffee. It's so I have to be careful how often I go.
Well, my sister says you get to feel good twice. You know, you feel good on the
Exactly.
purchase, and you feel good about what you know, how
Right, and it's
affected
also
someone else.
you know, it's a way to talk to people about
Right.
things that are going on in the
and
world.
educate people. Right.
Yeah, because
Absolutely.
you know, I'm sure having lived in Kenya, you would be sensitive to the ways in which Americans probably don't feel very connected to the rest of the world. We might, you know, be able to identify a country on a map, maybe not, depends on the country, but certainly the rest of the world knows about us. But we have the luxury of being able, I think, to maybe not see beyond our own borders, and so that kind of opens a world for somebody for just a little bit. Well, I'm glad somebody went and found your purse so we could show it. But what I was wanting to do was to just spend a little time talking now about Project AIDS Orphan, and certainly a powerful and inspiring ministry. Talk about how that started and where you are with that now.
We started, when we lived in Kenya, I worked at the local missionary hospital. And because I had a large Toyota Land Cruiser, once a week I was asked to drive a team out to the rural clinics that the hospital oversaw. So every week I would go out with my supervisor, whose name is David. David and I would go out together. He and I are about the same age. Our wives were both teachers. We have children the same age. Our professional background was the same. And every week we'd drive 2 hours to wherever we were going, work all day and drive 2 hours back. So for about a year I had this long commute, and we talk about things that were going on in our lives. And David, I think, had 13 siblings. His wife had 7. And when we were living in Kenya, one of his brothers and sisters-in-law had died from AIDS. And in African communities, what used to happen was if the parents died, the siblings of the parents would incorporate their children. So then the nieces and nephews were raised in the family, and that way they preserved family tradition, tribal culture, and there was someone who actually cared enough about these kids. And so David had assimilated the responsibility of caring for his niece and nephew. And we talked about the challenge that was for him financially to take on. He had 3 children and to take 2 more on. And then as we left Kenya, his wife's sister and brother-in-law had died, so then they were saddled with 3 more children. And when we came back to the States, our income was so comfortable that we would send David money to help him out. And because of the burden of so many deaths from HIV, most African communities can't absorb the children, and orphanages just don't work on that big of a scale. David and his wife had actually bought property, started building a structure to house an orphanage. But then when they started counting the orphans in their community, they realized that there's no way they could care for the 300 kids. So as we talked back and forth, and we mentioned this to Monica's family and to some friends of ours in Paducah, people said, well, how much could it be? We'd like to help also. So about a year ago, we got our 501c3 status from the IRS, and we have kind of opened up opportunities for other people to help or to join us as we're assisting David and his family care for their extended family in their community. And I guess it kind of started about a year and a half ago. A friend of ours was over, and he owns a business, and he said, well, I might want to give from my business to your organization, but this David guy, how do you trust him? How do you know that he's not going to take the money and run? And how does this work? And he had all kinds of questions, and Monica finally said, Paul, just take Todd to Kenya and show him. So Todd and I and Nathan Brown from Paducah, the 3 of us went to Kenya, and we said, okay, we're going to set this up. And we took pictures of the kids. We started looking at what they wanted to do when they grew up and how we could help them. And we talked about their families and those kinds of things. We came back to Kenya. One of the things when we were in Kenya, Todd, who's very methodical, structured, spreadsheet kind of guy, looked at David and his brother and his father and said, okay, but how are you going to sustain this? You know, we can't just keep giving you money. And David reached down, pulled out a notebook with all kinds of ideas. He said, if we have a sustainable farm, if we buy some cows, we can sell the milk. The milk will pay for school. And we might have to employ someone to milk the cows, so then that person can send their kids to school. And then if we have chickens, we can sell the eggs, we can sell this. And so they have this whole structure set up. And while we were there, Todd and David's wife were talking about, where do you get water? And she said, well, you know, most of the time we only have to walk 7 miles to get water, so it's really nice. And Todd says, why doesn't anyone dig a well? And she said, because none of us has the $250 that it would take. And Todd said, well, I'll pay to dig the well. And of course it was more than $250, but Todd had the reserves. And so through Project AIDS Orphan and David and his family, a well was dug in the community so that during the drought last year, they were actually able to provide enough water to keep the animals alive and keep the children and actually the whole community from suffering terribly. And then about a year ago, some of the students from Tillman High School contacted us and said, we're doing a hunger banquet, and we would like to give some of the proceeds to Project AIDS Orphan. And they did this wonderful program, and we were able to participate, and they gave us, I think, $1,700, which we sent to David, and David said, hey, we fed the entire community for a month.
Yeah. The whole region. I mean, it was a big,
And
big
I mean, it's
feeding.
not the kind of food that we would eat, but was enough to keep them alive for a month. And there was a church in town that stopped by one day, and the gentleman said, I'm not sure what this is for, but we decided to give this to you. And it was, again, a check for about $1,500. And the day before, David had text messaged me and said, the drought is terrible. And I said, well, how much would it take to keep the community going? And he said, this many Kenyan shillings, which translated exactly to $1,500.
That's a woo-woo moment.
Yeah.
It is. It's a very exciting, so you talk about an exciting opportunity. It really has been. And then in August this year, I went back to Kenya with Todd, and we went to see how things were going, because one of the wonderful things about the IRS is that they require that we make frequent site visits to make sure that things are actually going the way they are. And I was shocked at how well things had progressed. The kids were doing well. They all came out and sang songs, and they danced, and they did poetry that they recited for us. And then David brought out their report cards. And one of the boys he was ranked 68th out of 72 in his class a year ago, was very excited because now he's 37th out of 72 in his class. Because he gets to eat every day, and because he knows that someone cares. And at Christmas last year, David just decided that he would go out and buy shoes for all the kids that they're sponsoring right now. And some of the kids had never had a brand new pair of shoes before. So it's really exciting to see them do well. 3 of the kids have actually qualified to enroll in one of the very prestigious schools in Kenya, which is kind of a college preparatory. And it's an experimental school that the former president of Kenya has started and funded, and he pays half of the tuition. So through Project AIDS Orphan, we're helping 3 of these kids actually get one of the best educations available in Kenya. So it's very exciting because it's way more than we had really thought it could be. We were just hoping to feed these kids and give them shoes and clothes and mosquito nets and health care, and then they're turning around and saying, yeah, but I qualified to get into the top school in the country. And we said, well, then okay, you need to go.
Yeah.
And so that is very exciting.
And isn't that, it seems to me, so much the way that the Spirit works, is takes, things, there's all kinds of stories in the New Testament about things that have small beginnings that grow great, and that's so exciting. One of the things that I really appreciate about this effort is, because there are so many marvelous and important things happening to benefit folks who are struggling particularly in third world countries. What I love is the particularity of this. If I send money to organization X, I don't know really who's being affected. I know that they are. I can feel good about that. But this has faces and names that go with this, and that goes the other way too. That the folks who are, who are benefiting from generosity on, this side of the globe, know that there are particular people here who are invested in their growth and their prospering as people, and that is so appealing to me, and I thank you for that. That adds so much to my excitement for what you're doing. We have just a little bit of time left, and we could talk for another program and then another program. I do want to have people who might have an interest in hearing more about Project AIDS Orphan, or who might want to know a little bit more about fair trade and how that could be incorporated in something that they're doing. How would people be in touch with you if they wanted to have contact?
They can go to the website. It's www.projectaidsorphan.org.
Very good.
So that's one really easy way. There's a contact page. You can see, we have a blog on there, and you can see letters that are written from Kenya to us, and our communication and pictures of the farm that Paducah really put in last year. This city developed a farm with all their donations. Or you can go to www.theglobalnomad.biz. Either one of those will give you contact information. There's also the Fair Trade Federation. You can just Google Fair Trade Federation and find out about how you can find stores all over the country and get involved with fair trade. There's a bunch of really neat companies like Greater Gift that used to be Serve International that works with churches, and they do sell coffee, and they do gift bazaars at Christmas and things like that to support these little communities all around the world. So there's a lot of good ways to do that.
Well, I so appreciate the gift that you're giving Paducah and the work that you're doing, because you're helping Paducah connect with Paducah and to connect with the world in meaningful ways. So thank you for that. And I asked you if you'd bring a book very quickly, because one of the things that I appreciate is the opportunity to grow by reading, and so I asked if you'd bring a book or two that has been important to you. So I think you brought two.
Well, I do. I couldn't decide. Anything by Frederick Buechner is my favorite. He is my all-time most honest Christian writer I think there is. He's just wonderful. And this is called Telling the Truth. The Gospel is Tragedy, Comedy, and Fairy Tale. And then he has Whistling in the Dark, a Doubter's Dictionary. This one's real nice because it just has little 5-minute reads. So I didn't know if you needed if you needed just a little short something to think about, something to chew on. They're both wonderful books.
Well,
and he's a wonderful writer.
He is, and he's a good Presbyterian as well.
Oh, he is.
Yeah. One of the few ministers whose ministry is writing.
He's
that
wonderful.
I love.
He's got a heart that's just true and honest, and I've
beautiful.
Appreciated that from him.
He wrestles with important things.
Yeah, and he does so honestly, which is really nice to read.
It's refreshing. It gives us permission to be honest ourselves.
Yeah, it does.
Well, Monica and Paul, I want to thank you for coming today. And like I said, I could easily spend many more moments with you. I want to thank you for coming, and I am so heartened by the contribution that you're making. Thank you, viewers, for watching. If you'd like to be in touch with us, you can contact us at reflections at, well, I'm forgetting what it is. I think it's on the screen. PCM at hcis.net, and have your subject line be reflections. That's what it is, I'm remembering now. But thank you for being with us today. I hope that your day-to-day is blessed, and that you are inspired, as Paducah Cooperative Ministry is, to do God's work with human hands. Shalom.